Um, we're going to go ahead and get started. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. Only the panelists are displayed and heard, but we do want to hear from you. Please ask your questions using the Q&A panel on your Zoom bar, not in the chat. If it's in the chat, we will not be able to see it. Um, Feel free to ask your questions as the presentation moves along, but we will address them towards the end. And yes, a recording link as well as the slide deck will be shared as soon as possible after today's session. My name is Raquel Cloyd. I'm the Business Development Manager here at Intellect. In case you aren't familiar with Intellect, we are an award-winning quality management and environmental health and safety software company built on a no-code platform and powered with a robust AI integration. We help companies across a variety of industries to automate their quality processes, reduce operational risk, and achieve their quality and compliance goals. Those goals include achieving and maintain ISO, FDA, GXP, OSHA compliance, and more. Highly regulated industries, whether they be aerospace, med device, biotech, labs, electronics, automotive, they all need a highly tuned quality system to meet their needs and provide peace of mind when the auditor arrives. And Intellect has you covered. We have over 30 pre-built QMS and EH applications ready to use out of the box. Or you can configure or build out your own unlimited applications to meet any quality or business need. You can see in the lower left corner our social media badges. You can please follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and X. I always want to say Twitter, but I know I need to say X. And also, if you'd like to see a demo of our software, feel free to visit us at intellect.com, or you can simply type demo into the Q&A portion of the Zoom bar, and we will contact you after the webinar. I would like to welcome back and introduce to those who don't know him, Doug Wood. Doug is presented for us previously, and here he is today to talk about cost of quality. He is past vice chair of ASQ's Quality Management Division. He's a popular instructor, author, and quality expert. He's published several books on quality management. You can see a few of those listed below. And he holds several certifications, including Six Sigma Black Belt. He owns DC Wood Consulting and works with clients in a variety of industries. We're going to provide Doug's contact information at the end of the presentation. So if you'd like to talk to Doug, work with Doug, you'll have his info. The agenda today, what is Doug going to cover? 1, definitions and scope. What does ISO 9001 say about cost of quality? He's also going to address the risks that you need to be aware of, how to build out your quality cost metrics, and he's going to give examples. Also, the realities, how do you sell cost of quality to management, and what do you need to look out for? And finally, what is the opportunity, the payoff of managing your cost of quality? Before I hand it over to Doug, we'd like to know from you, how are you currently measuring cost of quality? We're going to be launching a poll with some options here. In a moment, please participate and let us know. Are you maybe not measuring cost of quality currently? Maybe you're using more manual methods like spreadsheets. Perhaps you have QMS software that helps you manage your cost of quality. If one of those options doesn't apply, please also include in the chat what that other is. We're very curious to know how organizations are measuring cost of quality currently. We're going to give it a minute to have everyone participate in the poll. I think we've got about 60% participating. We'd love to get as close as possible to that 100% because we do want to hear from you. Your answers and sharing with us helps us to determine our next webinars and what everybody wants to learn. So, all right, wonderful. I think we've got everybody who's answered. I'm going to go ahead and share the results. All right, it looks like about most people are using more manual methods, almost half in spreadsheets, followed by people who aren't measuring cost of quality. So this is a very a timely presentation for you to help you begin. And then some are using some QMS software currently, and we've got some of the others, which we'll hopefully share for a little bit later. All right. I am going to hand things over to Doug. Doug, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Raquel. So it's interesting the number of people who are in this webinar that aren't using it. Obviously this is a select group, and most of you kind of know what this is, and so you're probably doing it. Earlier studies have shown that 1 out of 10 companies measures it. 9 out of 10 don't. So that would cover, I don't know, everybody else, right? But we're a special group here today. So let's start off with part one. Definitions, scope, and ISO 9001. Here's the definition of quality costs. The difference between the actual cost of a product or service and what the reduced cost would be if there were no possibility of substandard service, product failures, or manufacturing defects. Now, we know that, yeah, you're not going to get there, but it's a target. It's a kind of like a foundation to go for. 9001, Clause 9, talks about performance evaluation, monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. It says shall, there's the word shall, right? What needs to be monitored, the methods are going to be used, and when. Again, this also includes cost of quality. And down there at the bottom, the performance and effectiveness of the quality management system. You can count the defects, and yeah, that tells you the performance and effectiveness, but there's nothing that talks to leadership like dollars and cents. Quality costs, or the term that I'm preferring to use is finance for improvement, makes it measurable, manageable. It gives management a metric that ties to financial performance. Of course, that's always desirable for senior management. It measures your results from a project. You can apply it in a project base, or you can apply it across the board for a system. It makes cause and effect show up in dollar terms. Here's a couple new terms for you. The 1960s language of cost equality talked about prevention and appraisal and failure costs. Well, that was 1960s. Today, there's different language, and calling waste is a good idea. And that would be failure cost. Okay. Appraisal, this is kind of a funny word, but monitoring is maybe more like what we try to do with that. And prevention, yeah, we know prevention's good, but it's really investment. What you're doing is you're putting money in to reduce the others. That's what you're trying to do. I've been asked whether or not I know any companies where the cost, or the prevention money, the investment equals the monitoring and waste. And my immediate answer is no. Nobody does that. What I found in most companies, for every $1 of investment, there are $4 in monitoring and $9 in failure. Okay, now think about that. $1 of investment stands against $9 of failure. So obviously, you could spend a lot more on investment and reduce your waste. So what do we call waste? Well, first of all, there's internal and external waste. The external waste used to be just called that external failure costs. I would prefer the term downstream consequences, because there's a lot that happens downstream. Some of it you can't put money on, like reputation. And so these are costs associated with deficiencies that are found after delivery of your product service to your customer. And of course, customer dissatisfaction as well. So this covers a whole lot of ground. The splitting point between this and internal waste is when you relinquish control of the material. Now, this can be at a loading dock. It can be, perhaps you ship it somewhere, but you still own it in another warehouse. The thing is, these are costs associated with deficiencies that are found before you deliver your products or services. and it also counts your process waste. This category is very often measured in businesses. You know, they weigh their scrap bin and they say, yeah, that's our internal waste. Of course, it's bigger than that, but still, that's a start. The monitoring costs. Now, these are costs associated with measuring, inspecting, testing, and evaluating or auditing products, materials, or services to verify conformance with standards. That's the key. Verify conformance. If you're monitoring, but you're not using it to verify conformance, then it's probably something else. And finally, our investments. Okay, these are expenses that are associated with designing, installing, maintaining, and auditing a plan of control. Now, plan of control is the key here for manufacturing products or delivering services that prevent the creation of defects and failures and prevent the creation of process wastes. So this usually ends up being a lot of little things in a lot of different places. It's more difficult to measure this. But remember, 1 to 4 to 9. So a small change in this, and we'll see that later, a small change in this drives a large benefit to the company. But let's talk about risk. Ooh, risk, the R word, the scary word, right? You know, if you're no ISO, okay, you know they added risk-based thinking in 2015. Some companies have sort of let that slide by and they're not looking at that. But the point here is we need to consider risk. Risk-based thinking says, okay, what do these phrases do you hear? Do you take these risks? Yeah, what you don't know won't hurt you. Of course it will. Or the risk of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But every method can be improved. The risk of, we're profitable, everything's fine here. I know companies like that. As long as they're profitable, there's no issues. Oh, come on. You might have a product with a huge margin on it, like maybe something in healthcare. The point is that that margin does not mean you don't have problems. And the risk of, we're the biggest in our market. Okay. It's worthwhile to look outside your four walls at what else is happening out there, because there's others that conceivably could be getting bigger and bigger, and they might supplant you, because that happens. So when we're looking at this whole cause and effect thing, I've kind of reverted to the old language here. Prevention and investment. Is it too low? Appraisal or monitoring. Is it too low or in the wrong places? We've often put monitoring in place where we had problems, but we don't have monitoring in place where the risk is. And then waste. What's driving your waste? I mean, you can see the waste, but what's actually the driver of it? And downstream consequences. What are they? Have you even asked? You know, the big thing here is we need to make sure that we understand how our firm compares to our firm in the past. Some people will say, well, you know, what's a normal number that I should have? And my answer to that is, don't worry about that. Compare yourself to what you've been doing, because this is a very custom measure. This is not something where there's a standard to follow. So how do you compare it to your past? And perhaps you've got decreasing volumes and your cost of quality is going down. Is it going down proportional to the change in your volume? So you need to include some kind of a ratio to understand that. And do you have mistakes in office work? Okay, that's a rhetorical question. Of course you do. Office work is driven by people and people make mistakes. But do the mistakes in your office drive failures in your production area? That's an open question. I don't know to what degree that falls. I don't even know. I don't think anybody has really looked at the linkages between office waste and production waste. But we know it's got to be there. So, do you measure all of this? No. No, you don't. and you don't have to. See, this is one of the problems when cost of quality is driven and run by accounting people, because the mantra of accounting is it's all in there. It's got to be fully accounted for. Everything's got to add up. But this is a management tool. This is a guide for decision making, a process guide. And so you don't have to measure all of it. Okay. Some of them are small or unimportant. Some are spread out, and it's really going to be hard to control that. And some are just really expensive to try to measure. We call these hidden costs. But good news, if you go after the ones and the causes of the ones that you can measure, you'll reduce these hidden ones. Here's the iceberg. Got to have an iceberg, right? Got to have one. All these talks on cost equality have icebergs. So you know the commonly measured ones, and then there's all these hidden ones. And the true failure is all of it. But if you go after the causes of the top, the part that you can see, you will reduce the parts that you can't see. That's what we call the multiplier effect. Okay, so let's talk about dishonesty. Yeah. Are you in quality and you're a traffic cop? You're there, policing the rules. What happens when you find somebody's made a mistake? Because, of course, everybody makes mistakes. But what do? You reward people who are honest and say they've made a mistake? Do you support quality of work? I mean, you really can't reward someone for making a mistake without looking like you're not supporting quality of work. This isn't an either or question. This takes a lot of finesse. You have to be really careful about this. If somebody has made a mistake and they've honestly admitted it, chances are they're beating themselves up over it. So you may not have to do any kind of punishment for this. One of the ways to avoid issues here is separate your high performance rewards from problem solving. If you're giving really great rewards for people solving problems, you're driving a firefighting mentality. You're rewarding people for putting out fires, for fixing problems. Are you rewarding them for avoiding problems? That would be better, wouldn't it? You want to focus on your root cause analysis and need support from the top and firm guidance at all levels to drill down into what's actually creating the issues. There can be errors that are accidental, and there's errors that are intentional. Now, the intentional ones are scary. The accidental ones people generally learn from, and they don't do it again. Another thing you can do is use a group measure. You see if everybody is individually rewarded for their own performance, when honestly, their performance depends on the team around them. That's going to create a lot of problems. People can dishonestly claim things that they didn't actually do. Okay? They'll steer the measures. So using a group measure makes a lot more sense than individual performance awards. All systems have errors. I have never opened a data set and didn't find it was full of junk. You probably have too. It's the point where you expect it to be full of junk, right? This is the bane of the big data people of the world. Okay, there's junk in their data sets. If these are large, they will make your reports useless. They'll damage your credibility. So you need to make manual corrections. You need human agency looking at this stuff before the publication goes out. And if you see something big, you need to do some things, but you got to be really careful. Only change large corrections. Don't get in fiddling with the tiny little bits, because that's just wasted time. If they're little, they won't bother anybody anyway. But keep your leadership informed of the size and the number of your corrections. You got to keep a log of those things. Okay. And if you're finding a system that is full of bugs, then you need to replace it or overhaul it. This has been true for decades. And your input people, where your data comes from, they need to be trained. The people who put the data in your systems are probably the lowest paid individuals in your company. And if they put it in wrong, You know what happens, garbage in, garbage out. So periodic retraining is important. Now let's talk about building the metrics, okay? In different organizations, these different categories might show up. If you're talking about manufacturing, these are the buckets, the categories, the broad looks of this thing. What is your supply chain cost of quality? What are you spending on planning? How about your support functions? Okay, see office. What about your production areas? That's probably pretty well handled. Quality assurance. They look at, again, prevention, and they look at monitoring, and they also look at waste. Shipping, distribution, all of these things are categories you'll find in a manufacturing organization. But in the office, the wastes are different. Perhaps you're familiar with the lean wastes. My master's thesis was on waste in the office. And I have a survey that I can use to help a company measure what the dollar cost waste in your offices are. It's an anonymous survey. People put in various answer questions. And here are the big categories. A meeting to no good purpose. I'm sure you've been in some of those in the last month. Rework, doing a report over again. Messaging messes. You've seen people who are texting each other and they're sitting in cubicles right next to one another. Do you know how to message? Is there a guide to tell people how to message others? That's a big deal. Workflow can be a problem. Okay. There's the issue of distractions. Now, there's two kinds of distractions. There's bad distractions and good distractions. In my survey, I discriminate between them because a good distraction takes you away and then you solve something. A bad distraction just takes you away from what you're working on and distracts you, gets you out of it. There's motivation issues. Again, people who are unmotivated. You can be waiting on the system. Okay, just waiting on the computer to do something. And yes, health is another category. All of these are usually unmeasured in an office environment. By the way, my study showed me that the average dollar cost of waste in the office, based on salaries, per person is $6,000 a year. How many people in your office? What could you do with that money? So yeah, this is a big deal. In services, workflow can be an issue. So can resource consumption. Very often in a service business, they don't monitor their resource use very well. You have bad outcomes. The guy drops the package on the front, on your front step and smashes it. Okay. You've got correction activities, handling complaints. There's revisits, coming back out again. You have your refrigerator worked on and then they have to come out again in a year and you come out again in 6 months. Yeah, you probably all had that problem happen to you. Revisits is a waste in service. Expediting. Oh, hurry up, get it done. We're late. And of course, delayed billing. Delayed bills mean you wait more time for your money. So in different organizations, we can look at this. In construction, we can talk about the 8 lean wastes. Typically, extra costs snowball from an upstream error in construction. One little mistake here and downstream, it creates no end of grief. There's waiting. A lot of people in construction, it's hurry up and wait. Delayed payments is a big deal. Rework. And again, contracts can be written where if you're late, you get paid less. So you have contractual losses here. In healthcare, oh, this is massive. Healthcare is generally profitable, except if you're a small hospital out in the country. But payments being denied. Maybe you did the paperwork wrong. Seems like a cost of quality to me. Complications for the patient or death. Yeah, I don't know how you would put a dollar value on that, but that's a serious downstream consequence. Insurance premiums on malpractice can rise if you make a lot of mistakes. Your reputation can go downhill. I will tell you, there are hospitals I will not go to. Absolutely not. In my own area. And then, of course, slow turnover, lost revenue, and lost capacity. After COVID, they all needed capacity. But because of issues, slow discharge and whatever, they lost capacity. So what do you leave out of cost of quality? What shouldn't you measure? I recommend not measuring sales or revenue losses. And the big reason is this: revenue losses include your margin. Internal costs do not. So now you're mixing apples and oranges between these two measures. But furthermore, if you start blaming revenue losses on internal process waste, internal issues, okay, now you're giving your salespeople an excuse to blame everything on your operations people, which is just bad, okay? There can be a million reasons why your revenue is going down. Maybe you have a new competitor out in the field. That's not your fault, okay? Money you spend to do it right the first time. This should be 80 or 90% of all of your money. This is good stuff. But remember, doing it right the first time, not redoing it. When you've got costs that spread over multiple years, it muddies the water to try to see what you're doing currently. And if you've made a mistake and you learn from it, you don't necessarily want to punish a group because they learn from it. You want learning to happen. Now let's talk about selling and strategy. So we're going to use the plan, do, check, act wheel here. I'm sure you're familiar with this. We're going to go around this and talk about selling cost of quality. To begin with, what is your strategy? What's your vision? Where's your waste happening? Figure this out. Just map it out. What is going on? And then start talking strategy and start talking vision. This is how you get your management interested. You want to seek out both stories of issues and metrics. Both of these are important to convince your leadership and anybody is what's the dollars, what's the story, what's the metric, and the story will bring them along emotionally. Then run a pilot. See how it does. This is the check part. Try it out and learn from it. And then you build your system, you act. So again, these are the 4 pieces, right? This is how you go about building it, going around the wheel. Now, you go around the wheel once to sell it, but it doesn't hurt to go around the wheel again periodically and update what you're doing, because these things all change. Your boardroom strategy centers on dollars. If you cannot measure your value in dollars, it's not strategic. This is a challenge for people, even in the HR business, in human resources. If they can't measure the human resources impact in dollars and cents, it won't enter the strategy of the company. So same is true of quality. Here's an example of a profit and loss report. We've made this simple so you can see it. You know, if you look down this list, you got the total sales, the cost of sales, $12 for salespeople, and then 88 is your gross profit. And then you go down the list of all your various fixed expenses and then variable expenses. Okay. Can you see cause and effect? Is it visible here? This is what I meant. Accountants will make sure all of this adds up. But cost of quality, in the words of accounting, you are cherry picking. You're picking out bits and pieces from these expenses and putting it in a cost of quality report that will show cause and effect. I've heard that term cherry picking used in a derogatory sense by accountants about cost of quality. It's a good thing because it helps you with cause and effect. Let's talk about the opportunity and the payoff for this whole thing. Is there a return on investment? Let's do a simulated example. So I have a simulator that actually looks at these factors. And it's adjustable for different size organizations. Let's say we've got a company with $350 million of annual revenue. Okay, plug that into it. They've got 600 employees with typical wages. And so the number of employees and the wages are not, it actually looks at salaried employees and direct labor employees and 2 different wages. So it's more complex than that, but this is simplifying it a bit. It also talks about how many steps do you have in your flow. We got 90. And what is the average rate of scrap production at each of the 90 steps? We're saying a 1% chance of failure at each of 90 steps. Now, that seems like a pretty low number, but it adds up. And finally, how many defects do you ship? See, this is how you get at downstream consequences and after, failure costs after you ship. 5% of your shipping has defects. And of course, the cost of those are higher per occurrence than the ones you're scrapping internally. Let's put these numbers in and see what the chart shows. So this is the chart it's a dial in Excel. I managed to find some Excel code that actually creates this dial. Okay. And this gives you the percentage profit in this $350 million company before we make any changes. And so, 12.9%. Boy, that's pretty good, isn't it? They're making good money. But what could we do to improve it? And what would it look like afterward? Okay. So we can look here at changes. So another input to the simulation is how much of a reduction are you expecting in your scrap rate? We're talking a 4% reduction in scrap. So you're going down to 0.96 on your scrap rate, not 1%. Okay, so that's a 4% reduction. It seems like a modest amount. Surely you could get that from proper investments. And then we're going to change our shipping defects from 5% to 3%. So we're going to go from 95% good to 97% good. Okay, seems achievable. So here's what the chart changes. And in the simulation, you get both of these. So you're up to 16.5% profit. So a difference of almost 4% in your profits on $350 million. So then the question is, well, what do we have to spend to get there? Well, the chart also comes back with this. You have a before and after stacked bar chart. And in red, we're seeing the monitoring or appraisal. In green, we're seeing the waste internally. And in purple, we're showing the external failure. Again, this is a simulation, but I've used this with companies and they've said, that sure looks like us. Okay, so this isn't out of line for various firms. Now, notice there are two vertical axes. On the left-hand side, we have appraisal and failure. See, those are big. Remember, 1 to 4 to 9? So the 4 and the 9 are over on the left because they're much larger. On the right-hand side, you have the prevention expense and the investments. And so we use a black line to show what that does. And so you've increased your prevention from 60,000 to 100,000. You're spending 40,000 more. And you'll notice how the appraisal and failure costs have come down just a little. Again, these were modest improvements. But that went from roughly 11 million down to what, 10 million 5. So $50,000 of return, and you added 40,000. Again, the simulation is possible. I can use this with any company, and we can take a look at that. So we have some additional resources. We want to point you to my book from Quality Press, and I have some blog articles. Types of waste in the office and their relative magnitudes. That's my master's thesis. Critical success factor most often left out, and you know what that one is. Project-oriented cost of quality. So that's another thing which actually is not in any of my books. And how do you account for the cost of mistakes? That's kind of a common English thing that you might see if you go to my website. Again, it's under articles on my website. And thank you for listening to me. And I think we're ready to go now, right, Rachel?
Yes, thank you, Doug, so much. And we're going to be answering your questions shortly. So if you haven't already, you have questions for us, please enter them into the Q&A portion of your Zoom bar. Before we get into the Q&A, perhaps you are not ready to look at a QMS for your company, but you might know somebody who is. We wanted to introduce our share and receive referral program where you can earn up to $5,000 by referring a friend who may need a QMS. $100 if they take a meeting with one of our account executives, and if they become a customer, $5,000 to you or your company. So if you'd like more information on that, there is a link in the bottom right corner, which you will get when you get the slide deck about our referral program. And as promised, before we begin the Q&A, here is Doug's contact information. You can reach him at his email address. If you scan the QR code there with your phone, you can be directed to his LinkedIn record. His phone and email and website are all there for you if you'd like to work with Doug or contact him. We have a couple of upcoming webinars that may be of interest to you. First is part 2 to this series. We are going to do a live demo of our cost of quality app that's part of our QMS solution, and you can see how to manage some of the things that Doug has been talking about today within a software like ours. So that's coming up on Thursday, February 15th. There's a link to register there. You can go to intellect.com as well. And then later on in February, we are going to be welcoming another ASQ instructor, Chad Smith, who will be discussing data quality. So sharper data, better decisions, data quality, and reliability on the plant floor. If you'd like to register for either of those, they are both free. Go to intellect.com and sign up today and share the link with your colleagues. All right, well, we're going to be jumping into the Q&A portion here. Doug, I'm going to be asking you questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. What is the most important step to get started with cost of quality?
Okay, most important step. Well, first of all, you have to find out what your senior leaders want to get out of it. How do they see it? What is their, how do they envision this helping the strategy? Now, sometimes you got to help them with that. Okay. But you want to make sure that they're on board, because you're going to need access to all kinds of cost information. And very often this sort of stuff is held close. Companies, different departments don't want to share. So you're going to need your support of your top leaders to get in and look at that information. You also have to have some kind of a goal set by your top leaders. How much of a reduction are they seeking? This is a driver for everyone across the business to take part. And they're going, oh yeah, well, I guess that's pretty important. So that would be the most important step. Besides that, I think you need to be friends with people in your cost accounting area. And they need to trust that you're not going to expose any of the bad data that inevitably resides in every system. So you don't want your accounting people going, oh, they're going to find out all the mistakes we made. No, you need to make sure they trust you.
Okay, thank you. That relates to another question here. Should this project be run by our accounting department?
No, that's quick. No. Again, for reasons I mentioned earlier, the accounting people expect it all to add up. And they're going to look at this and go, oh, well, you're just picking and choosing little bits and pieces out of our accounting systems. And that's called cherry picking. And that's bad. Yes, from an accounting standpoint, that's a bad idea. But remember, this is a behavior management tool, a process management tool. And that's not something that most people in accounting, really think about. How are people going to use what we put out? We put out what everybody else does. It all adds up. That's their guideline. So no, they should not run it. They should have input. They should be there because they know where the skeletons are buried and they can help you get the data that you need. But it should be run by the quality group or the improvement arm. Some quality groups do improvement. Some quality groups simply enforce standards. But it should be an effort to improve things.
Thank you, Doug. Next question. What are some examples of ratios for quality cost and cause and effect?
Okay, so additional investments versus reductions in waste. I guess that's kind of what they're looking for. My general rule is 1 to 8. Every additional dollar spent in investment and prevention gives you an $8 reduction in failure cost. However, I have done studies looking at lean applications in various healthcare organizations where the return on investment was as large as 1 to 300. An additional $1 saved $300. And I wanted to publish that, but the management at that healthcare institution, they were terrified at that kind of return on investment, because what does that say about their cost control and their smarts in managing? It doesn't say good things. So I was not allowed to publish that, but I've seen that kind of return. It depends on the degree of control of your organization, but even a well-controlled, a tight ship, you're going to see, many-fold return on investment, even in the course of a year. 1 to 4, 1 to 8, 1 to 10.
All right, next question. And it's a question with an example. How do you obtain, track, and present potential issues? For example, I scrapped 2 lots for X amount, but if this issue was to continue, the cost would be higher amount. With a different issue with a higher actual scrap cost, has a low potential cost, but that gets all the attention. So the potential issue does not get the attention. So how do you obtain, track, and present potential issues?
Okay. Well, first of all, something that actually happened is definitely going to get more attention than something that might happen. But one way that you can deal with that is you can take your potential issue, okay? Let's say, we have a 10% chance of rejecting another 20 lots. Well, what's the cost of rejecting those 20 lots? Multiplied by 0.1, 10%. And that establishes what we would call an expected value of your potential problem.
Okay. Next question. And this is probably one that all those who are not managing cost of quality would like to know. How do you sell cost of quality of audits to management?
Okay.
How do you get management on board?
How do you get them on board? Okay. Well, you need to ask them questions like, do we know if we're investing in the right places? Do we know what our wastes are in dollar terms? How and is it desirable to reduce these wastes? Of course, that's kind of a rhetorical question, but they're going to say, well, we run a tight ship and we're profitable, so who cares? Those are the kind of, you need to come back with, but we could be more profitable. Okay, that the cost of quality is often 10% of revenue, very often. And the tool I've got, the simulator with those handful of numbers in there, can actually show what a reduction of cost of quality could be without having to actually go and measure it. So there's several ways to do that, but mainly you have to talk to your executives and you got to ask them questions. If you have examples of serious wastes, places that a lot of money got lost because of a mistake, use those stories along with the dollars and cents to help them. That's what I would do.
All right, thank you. Next question. What do you feel is the most effective means to monitor poor quality as a metric when there are many different products being manufactured involving many different manufacturing processes? So a potential example would be quality complaints per number of deliveries. So what the most effective means to monitor poor quality as a metric?
Okay, so you're counting deliveries and you're counting deliveries that went wrong, right? And so each time a delivery goes wrong, there are repercussions for that. So you make a list of these various consequences. And usually those consequences have actions that you have to do, special actions you have to take. And so you can create what's called a standard cost of a reject or standard cost of an error by looking across a variety of these issues and costing it out. if you're at a warehouse and you you have a back order, right? What do you do when you have to back order? Well, you got to expedite the next run of things, and you got to call people, and you got meetings people have to hold, and you've got rush shipping, and all of those are costs, and you can figure what they are. Okay, so now you can come up with the standard cost of a back order, or say a late shipment. But then you got to think about this too. There are lost shipments that are for special customers and lost shipments for run-of-the-mill customers. You probably do a lot more activities on the missed shipments for the special customers. And so you're going to end up with two standard costs, one for your run-of-the-mill late shipment and one for your special customer late shipments. So that's how I would approach that. Then all you do is you count the late shipments and you multiply by the standard cost.
All right. Next question. Do you think the shift to hybrid or remote work has changed cost of quality in organizations?
Ooh, boy, there's a good one. Hybrid and remote. Okay, so I think it can be a mixed bag. And we're talking, this is office work that's going to be remote, right? And so what happens to office work? For one thing, meetings to no good purpose are probably going to be reduced in length. Okay, so that cost is probably lower. On the other hand, communication errors could go up. And again, like I said, I have a survey that could be used. You could run the survey for a group of people in the office, at home, and whatever, and find out, is there a difference between them? In my study a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, okay, I couldn't see any significant difference in the cost of office waste between people who work at home or people who go to the office. I don't know if that's true now, because I have not had a lot of research just recently, last year or two.
All right. Next question. Any thoughts on how to measure cost of quality with customer dissatisfaction?
Ooh, okay. Yeah. Well, when a customer is dissatisfied, there's reputation issues, which are almost impossible to quantify. If a customer has dropped you because of a string of issues, okay, you might look at the cost of replacing that customer, finding replacement customers, okay? That would be a real thing. Again, I would not count lost revenue. I would say, what is it going to cost us to replace that customer? But there's a whole string of activities that take place when a customer is angry or upset. You're going to maybe give them a price break. So the difference between what they would have paid and what price break you gave them, that's a cost of quality. Because they're paying less because you made them angry. You might do a number of meetings and special trips and things like that where you have to go see them. That's money spent because of the dissatisfied customer. So those are some of the things that you could identify.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How do you determine if it's cost effective to rework or scrap?
Oh, okay. Well, rework, you don't know what it's going to cost to rework. Okay. You have some estimates. Let's say you're making I don't know, you're making a steel wheel for an automobile. Okay. Just round steel wheel. Okay. And comes off the line and it's got some scratches in the paint, and you can strip it and repaint it. So there's a cost you can measure associated with that rework. Okay. The cost of replacing it. So what have you got into it at that point? Now, to do this, you really have to have a cost accounting system that measures the gradual accumulation of labor and materials as the part processes, because your scrap part probably is only part way through. It's not done yet, right? And so you got to know what you've got in it at that point. Working with an office supply company a number of years back, they had an internal cost structure that was horribly out of whack. And they measured the cost of a desk drawer, one of these big steel desks, right? The desk drawer, and the cost accounting system said it was 17 cents. The paint was more than 17 cents. So you need to have a cost accounting system that works. Some companies have gone to an abbreviated cost accounting system. In other words, it just piles up all the money and it only counts value on completed good items. And it does what they call backflushing. These kinds of cost accounting systems are almost useless to determine how much have I got in this item halfway through. So that's one of the challenges you have. It has to do with your cost accounting system, but that's how I would do that.
Okay. Next question. At which point do you reduce appraisal costs / expense? What do you use as a guidance?
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to know that my investments have reduced the failures. Okay. So I'd want some history. I want to be looking at this for a period of time. You got to be safe about reducing your monitoring. But then you have to use your knowledge of the process and what the monitoring is doing. And how likely is it the monitoring is actually changing things? If you reduce the inspection, which is a mode of control, you can replace it with auditing, which is a mode of measuring what the process is doing, not controlling it. Most audits don't control anything. They simply tell you what's going on. So typically that's where the transfer occurs. And I'm thinking that a lot of the a lot of the monitoring expense we have in place has just historically been there. We had a problem and we put another check on it and we kept the check because we were afraid of not taking it. So those kinds of things where look for stuff that's really obsolete to remove in your monitoring cost. Hopefully that helps.
Okay, thank you. Here's a question that I'm going to take a stab at before I give it to you, Doug. How do you feel about cost of quality software? And is there any software you can recommend? Intellect does have a cost of quality application in our QMS. So I would recommend us, if you'd like to see a demo, type in demo in the Q&A portion and we can show you to see if that's something that would be benefit to you. But Doug, I'll let you answer.
Okay, yeah, I think it's great to use software to take care of some of the larger categories. But as you move into other areas in your company, it's not likely that a cost of quality software is going to handle, unusual things. Okay. I mentioned the expected waste from, potential things. I don't know if that's something that's built into the module. So what you're going to need is you're going to need some kind of, for your own interest, you're going to need to be able to modify it. And if I heard you say, Raquel, that your software does allow modification and additions. So you're going to need to have someone who knows the software and is able to work it. Okay. If you just buy it and plug it in and you don't have anybody that understands what it does, then you're going to have your usefulness of it will be limited.
Agreed. Yes, and that's where our no-code software can be modified for that purpose. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next question. Every identified ISO process requires a metric to determine if the process is effective. What process metric would you track for sales contract review, if not using meeting targeted external sales?
Okay. Sales contract review.
If
Okay.
they're not using the metric of meeting targeted external sales.
Okay. So sales contracts are often not read. You put these things together, there's all kinds of clauses in there and details, and it's only when your customer's angry that you find out that, oh yeah, we didn't have that, or we had that in there, or we left that out, and so I suspect you need to look at customer complaints that relate to the contract and what the contract had in it and what the contract did not have in it. The hardest thing to see is what's not there. And so your actual complaints is probably one of the best ways to determine whether or not your writing, your creation of your contracts is good. And it's an evolving thing, okay? Because your contracts are evolving. They're not static. So this is kind of an ongoing kind of metric you're going to need. It's not as hard and fast to say, dollars and cents profit, but it is a way to determine you're looking for a qualitative metric on a contract, not a quantitative one. And quantitative is a number, and that tells you something, but it doesn't tell you why. Okay, and when you're dealing with contracts, you really got to know why. So that becomes a qualitative or a judgment. Okay, hopefully that helps. We have any more questions? Raquel, are you still there?
We talked about how to present cost of quality, make it. Is there an approach to present? Oh, I am here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Internet
Yeah.
is a little unstable. Am I back on
Mhm.
board? Okay, wonderful. Sorry.
Yeah.
Had a little bit of an internet blip there. Okay, so we talked about how to present cost of quality to management to get them on board. But there's a question related to frontline staff. So is there a best approach to present COPQ to frontline staff? I'm often seen as a sheriff instead of a partner in a way that speaks to their needs, not mine.
Okay. So you got frontline staff that is doing some task immediately with the product. Okay. And they might not have any idea what the cost of the product is. Okay. So you often need to put a dollars and cents on that. Okay. If they understand that their task is adding $20 of cost and $40 of value into the product. Now anybody can understand that. People balance their checkbook all the time. And so they can kind of understand, well, I'm contributing that much. So that's one way to do it. But another way to do it is to tell them about downstream consequences. Many people don't understand that what they do will eventually be seen by the customer. And they want the customer to be happy. Very few people want a dissatisfied customer, even if it's way downstream. They like to think, well, I'm making somebody's life better. So tell them about what purpose that their work delivers. Ask them, how can their delivery of that be better than it was? Okay. And give them the tools to understand where they fit into the entire flow. In this manner, it's really motivational technique. Hopefully that helps.
Yep, definitely. And we in a quality culture where everyone is a part of quality, right? Everybody in the organization.
Yep.
All right, thank you. We have time for just one or two more questions. What would be a good figure to measure our COPQ, wasted material and labor costs against? What would we compare that lost material or labor cost to?
I'm assuming we're talking about growth or reduction in size, and you're trying to do some kind of a ratio to grasp that. Okay, so a couple things about the ratio. First of all, it needs to be something that the people in that working area understand. Okay, in a warehouse, they understand wholesales shipped. Okay, if you're talking about a procurement group, it's dollars of material purchased. Okay, so you need to look at a measure that is understandable to that group in what that volume metric would be. Second of all, you want that volume metric to occur at the same time period as your cost of quality. If you're counting sales as your volume, and you're counting internal production cost of quality, and they happen 6 months apart, you don't want to make a ratio out of those two because it's just going to jump around crazy. So you need to have your cost, your denominator, your volume metric happen at the same time of your actual cost of quality. That would, and you might need more than one.
All right. Well, thank you, Doug. Last question, because we're running out of time here. And this, AI is, last year was, the buzz. It's still the buzz today. We have an AI integration in our QMS that can help with this. But the question is, do you think artificial intelligence tools could help with aspects of cost of quality?
Oh, absolutely, they can. You know, I think AI today is best used as something to question your assumptions. Are you really getting all the thoughts? Are you confused? Are you missing something? Okay. And AI can be really good at pulling out knowledge from different places and giving you another perspective. Okay. The other thing that I think AI is really good at is broadening your horizon like that. But you need to be careful, because how do you know it's right? This is where there's a need for human agency to really understand the process and put some smart brains with the AI so that you can actually get a good answer out of it. That's my thought on that.
All right. Well, thank you, Doug, so much for joining us once again and sharing your knowledge. Thank you, everyone, for attending, engaging in conversation, asking your questions. Again, you can contact Doug at the information there on the screen. You can contact us at Intellect as well. Everyone, have a great rest of your day.